Hi, everyone. This is Jill Lawrence from Our Town for NCTV, and we are doing a fun Zoom coffee chat today. My guests are two wonderful women that are both current Norfolk School Committee members, and they're both running for re-election in the upcoming town election for the town of Norfolk. So with me is Medora Champagne and Jennifer Wynn. Welcome, ladies.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Jill.
Great. Well, this is your stage, your coffee chat. And so this is going to be a nice, 25 minutes or so of getting to know you so that the community can get to know you a little bit better as they go in next week to vote in the local election. Um, so I guess we'll start with that. I don't know who wants to go first, but what we'd love to do is just hear just a couple minutes from each of you about your background in general, how long, say, you've lived in Norfolk, in the town, and maybe a little bit about, your families, if, and going to school, public schools, as well as your experience on the school committee, because you're both, again, have already served and running for reelection. So you've already got experience behind you. So Medora, do you want to start?
Sure, I'm happy to. I apologize. I'm a little raspy from allergies. I think, Jill, you're experiencing the same thing right now. So I will, I will keep it brief. So my name is Medora Champagne. I have lived in Norfolk since 2007. So it is we are racking up the years here as far as our tenure in town. I have two kids who are moving through the local school systems. I have a son who's in the 6th grade this year and a daughter who is in the 2nd grade. So we're very much entrenched in the local public schools. Professionally, I'm an attorney, and I also, in addition to my attorney job, I also teach as an adjunct at New England Law Boston. Periodically. I've been teaching over Zoom for the past year, so I'm feeling all of the pain points we've been feeling in getting this up and rolling. I have a lot of sympathy for the technological issues that you've been going through here. As far as my experience on the school committee, it had been a fairly easy row to hoe until this past year or 15 months, I guess. But I was thrilled to be elected back, 3 years ago. I think we actually had a contested race at that point, so I was very happy to be elected to serve. In the time that I've been on the committee, I've served on a few subcommittees. I'm on the budget subcommittee, so each year I've gone through the kind of long task of sorting out the budget for the subsequent year. In addition to that, I'm on the construction subcommittee. So our largest project during my tenure on the committee so far has been the HOD roof project that happened a couple of years ago, which I can just succinctly say came in on time and under budget. So I was really thrilled. I think we were all really thrilled with the project as it turned out and the partnership we had with MSBA in that respect. And then most recently, I served on the union negotiation subcommittee earlier this year to finalize contracts with our teachers union going into our next contract phase. So I'm really looking forward to continuing my service on the committee. I'm going to be continuing on in the construction subcommittee, and our current primary goal is to move forward the proposed expansion project at the Freeman Kennedy School to address the spacing needs we've been having at both school buildings due to enrollment.
Oh, great. So you're really spread, like doing get your hands on a lot of things on the school committee. So that's fantastic.
I assumed that if I was going to serve, I might as well roll up both sleeves and get involved. But really, I think as far as the construction and capital improvement subcommittees are concerned and the budget subcommittees, it all goes hand in hand. So, all of that, once you start gathering all that information together and kind of laying it together, it all starts to make sense kind of in concert with each other. So I don't feel like I'm stretched too thin. I think that it's leveraging one committee into another committee and trying to, be an effective and efficient public servant.
Yes, and it's great. Well, they are. You're right. They're pieces, like the puzzle pieces that all fit together to bring to serve on the school committee with all the parts of that, all the different facets of how to manage a school district. So and the roof project at HOD seems like it went once it once it got going forward, it went pretty smoothly, and it got completed, and it seemed like it went very smoothly from this community member's perspective. Maybe
That's
not when you were in
good.
the trenches.
It's great to hear that. No, I mean, and credit where credit is due. We had an amazing team. We had a good partnership with the select board in town, and the town administrator during that project, and our town facilities director did an amazing job. I'm not sure he slept while that project was going on. He was just making sure that everything was being done, to the letter of our contracts, and making certain that it was going to be, the school building was going to be ready for the kids to be walking in the door on the first day of school, and they were. And we're really thrilled with the outcome, and thrilled with the cost savings the town saw as a result of our partnership with MSBA and the
Right.
close management, from the town and the school side as well. So it was definitely successful, and it was a really fast turnaround time. So we were thrilled that it was completed the way that it was.
Yeah, that sounds.
I have to add, I'm sorry, Jill, I have to add the teachers, and I know my daughter are thrilled. There are no more buckets of rainwater in the classroom. And my daughter has also reported it is now warm in the cafeteria because the roof is now insulated.
Right. Oh, great. Well, good. And I know that you got the grant. I remember that the grant that was important to get that extra money to help reduce the cost for the town, for the taxpayers. So.
Oh, certainly. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, I mean, I think we came in, to the tune. It was a six-figure budget savings, even under what we had budgeted for with the town, taking into account the MSBA grant. But MSBA is fantastic to work with, and we're aggressively pursuing a partnership with them on the Freeman Kennedy expansion project, and we're hopeful that we may be able to work with them again, because it's just such a great partnership. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that's good news. Awesome. Okay, so thank you, Medora, for that intro and that background of yours. And Jennifer Wynn, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Jill. Thanks so much for having me here. I think it's important to note that while this isn't a contested race, there are 2 spots open for each seats. Medora and I think I can speak for us, really felt it was important for especially the newer community members to get to know who's on the school committee, because I know several years ago when we ran, I didn't really feel like I knew who was representing the school system, who was putting forth budget, who was going forth with policy. So I'm just really happy to be here and introduce myself. So with that being said, I've lived in Norfolk since 2007. My husband and I, and we loved it so much. We bought a house here, and I have 2 children, and 2 girls, and one is in 5th grade. The other one is in 2nd grade. And I'm also a speech language pathologist, and I've worked in the public education system for over 20 something years. So I have a very good idea of how I have a couple different points of view. I have a teacher hat, I have a parent hat, and now I have a school committee member hat. And part of that hat is probably not as illustrious as Medora and budget and capital buildings, but I'm on the policy subcommittee, and policy subcommittee comes from MASC, which is the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. Mm-hmm. It's really top down. I think, and I don't know if Medora, if you would agree or disagree with me, I think sometimes there's a misconception that school committees have a lot of authority in terms of for minutia in the school system, and we really take our direction. We have budget and we have policy, and as Medora stated, she's on budget. On policy, we get a lot of our policies get dictated to us from MASC, which is the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, and then we look at them and kind of say, oh, does this fit in with, how do we tailor it for? Do we need to add anything? Do we need to tailor it specifically for Norfolk? And that's pretty much my role in attending. I think I've attended the majority of school committee meetings. I think I missed 2 over the 3 years because of family illnesses. And I'm proud to serve. I really feel that I'm an advocate for education, but as well as climate and culture of the school, that I believe very strongly that we are a community and we all need to work together.
Mm-hmm. And you're so good, Jen, at representing the school committee as well as yourself in the greater community, so I think that serves you really well, that people know that you're a voice of reason, and that you're also very willing to listen to all sides and to take that, to listen take that what you're hearing. I think that it seems that as this last year has gone, with my interactions with school committee members, it's that just listening and kind of understanding the perspective and even trying to share it, share the perspective of their constituents is just, it's such an important part of it, to really be open-minded and listen to what the community has to say. And not everyone's, obviously there's all different viewpoints, right? And it's a challenging position to be in. So I guess I should have started by saying on behalf of our town, thank you for serving in this role, because it's always challenging. And in the last 13 months or so, it has been several hundred notches more challenging. So yes, we appreciate you, and we're glad that you're running again and not walking away. That's actually another testament to you being great public servants. So thank you. So I guess my next part, I did ask the community just in the last day or two if anyone has questions for you, rather than trying to do like a live Zoom. Can you imagine if we tried that tonight? That would have been crazy, because I had some technical issues. But we asked if anyone had questions, so we could certainly jump into those, and you can each each answer them all, or or take turns. But before we do that, I just want to make sure, is there any other things that you just want to bring up, as whether it has to do with this last challenging year with the pandemic and how it's changed education, hopefully temporarily, or anything. Is there anything else you want to mention?
Thank you. I feel like I always go first.
Talking.
And I'm happy to do that, but I've tried to tell myself to give wait time. I think if I had a message, it would be, I understand how difficult it has been on many, many perspectives, and challenging. And the changes, I think human beings in general don't like changes, right? We're creatures of routine, most of us.
Right.
And I just want to say thank you to the parents. No, thank you to the children, which all the way up to high school. And again, I know we're pre-K through 6, but I do recognize, especially I work with middle school. So I see it, for being so flexible. It's been incredible. And my message would be, Jill, something you had brought up earlier in terms of, how are decisions made? Everything is, in my opinion, is still fluid. We get information top down from DESE, and then from there we look at what goes on in the district and what we can do. And I think things are getting better. I would like, in my opinion, I think, at least for me, I'm prepping, things will still be fluid and changing, and it'll be small changes. And I know that's not what people really want, but that's my prediction, is we're going to slowly ease back into the normal. So
that's great. Well, that's great. I think it's such a good point, though, to remind us that as parents, or as community members, that it's the changes, it's been fluid, but also that you have to take what's coming from the department. I think of it as the Department of Ed, but as the Department of the DESE, the Department of, is it the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education? And that you have to really, during this unusual time that we've had, with a lot more right, statewide restrictions, right, than we've ever probably seen in our lifetime. So you're taking that, and then you're trying to make the best decisions you can for our own town, our own district. So Medora, is there anything else you wanted to add before I get to the questions from the community?
Well, I certainly want to move on to the questions from the community, but I do, I think that it tremendously bears meriting or merits mention. I'm sorry. that the resilience of the students in our district this year has been tremendous. And I know that myself, as both a parent and a committee member, have probably not always exhibited the same amount of resilience and adaptability that, my 8-year-old has. And I've been so impressed. And I know that the students who are going to be coming out on the other side of this experience are going to be different kids than they were on March 10th, 2020, March 1st, 2020. And we all probably would have preferred that they had had a different experience in this time frame. But that it doesn't mean that it won't be a growth process and a beneficial experience for them to have had as from a standpoint of adaptability and resilience. So I would also like to say the same for the teachers. I mean, I know locally in our district, I have been overwhelmed really with the flexibility and the willingness of the teachers to work within the parameters that the district has set and that DESE has imposed. And it has been a challenge, as challenging as it has been for a school committee to receive feedback from DESE. And I mean, I think over the course of last summer, it was changing every 2 to 3 weeks what the expectation was going to be. And it was tremendously frustrating. And simultaneously, we had teachers who wanted to come back and teach and didn't know what that was going to look like. And everybody showed up and did their best and, tried to make the best of what was a really unexpected and unparalleled experience. And so I've been really pleased with just the way everyone, from the students to the teachers to the parents, has been willing to work with what we have. And for the most part, shown some grace and patience through the process too. And again, not even I have been, always adaptable and always graceful in that process. And, it's been a real grind, and it's hard now at the end of the year with things starting to open back up, but we are still subject to the, directives we're receiving from the state level. And so we have to work within those parameters.
Right. Now, that was important to mention, because obviously doing this meet and greet or whatever at this point, even though there are a couple other topics we want to touch on, but the pandemic is always at the forefront of everyone's mind. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, and that it does sound like it is amazing how resilient or how, I think adaptable is the best way. Yeah, how adaptable these children are, and they're better at it than than us adults.
Certainly better at it than I am. I mean, I'm doing my best, but it's a challenge. And, I think that we, everyone is, giving all that they can to try and make this work and work as well as we can. And everybody knows that it's not perfect. And I think it's been a common refrain. I don't think we've had a single school committee meeting this year where it hasn't been mentioned that we'd all like the kids to go back to school full time. I mean, it's kind of a recurring theme in our discussions. And, now we're at that point, and, I think we're happy with where we are and hopeful that we can, get through to the end of the school year with some success in that regard.
Yes, that Norfolk Public Schools went back full time on April 5th, right, 2021.
And we announced that we were going back, I believe, at the February school committee.
We did.
And people were like, why can't we open up next week? And I'm like, well, and then Ingrid's like, well, we have to work with Holmes, they don't just serve us, we got to figure out the busing routes. We've got to redo all the teachers, the lunch schedules, this schedule. We got to figure out the spacing for the eating. Now we went from 12 kids. Okay, no problem. Now we've got 24 that we got to space. And do we eat outside? And then mask breaks also have to be spaced out. So there was a lot of time and effort. Believe me, if all of us wanted to, everybody was working very hard. But I also want to acknowledge the extreme frustration many felt as well, and I want to acknowledge that. And also, one more thing, I know I can talk a lot. I do want to say, yes, I agree that many students have come out more resilient and adaptable and flexible, and I think, many will come back. But there's also many that we as a school committee have recognized that will need some social emotional support. So I just want to let people know out there that is definitely one of our top priorities, as well as assessing and learning loss and implementing some active recovery learning strategies. I believe that's what DESE's calling it now. I was just signed up for a workshop on it. was through Mask. Did you get that, Medora?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
And I believe it actually came out just today that the district is going to be offering over the summer tutoring services for students who are deemed to have fallen behind, to a certain degree across the course of the year with learning loss, so that when they're entering in the fall, they're more, in lockstep with their peer groups at grade level, so that there's not that concern about learning loss as a result of COVID, which certainly, it would be naive to think that that would not happen the way that school has been this year. So we're, I think as a district, taking every every step we can to try and address those needs head on and get out in front of them.
And also assess in the fall too. We talked about that at the last school committee meeting for those students who maybe can't access those summer programs. Things will be happening in the fall as well. And we'll be tracking those students for the lot that haven't recouped what they lost.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And that does answer one of the community questions, which was my question. And so I think we've covered that mostly, but to clarify, you at the February 2021 Norfolk School Committee meeting, you did vote, or however the official was, to start to get a start date and to get everybody in full time. I know kindergarten was going first, and one of the main stumbling blocks was the busing. And when you mentioned Holmes, I just wanted people to make sure they understood that's the bus company, local bus company, and that was a stumbling block in that, not because of Holmes, but because of needing to have social distancing on the bus according to the guidelines from the state, right? The restrictions from the state. So once that was settled, which actually ended up getting settled from the top down, right? It was settled from the way the state changed those guidelines. Then it was full steam ahead, right? For as far as you were concerned, you could again get ready, get not have to take the bus challenge off your plate and just focus on lunches and lunch and math breaks and the things within the building.
That's correct. I mean, and we did the original plan to reopen had some of the timing was different. It was going to be a phased reentry based upon grade level. It wasn't going to be all in at once. Some of the considerations that were being taken into account too were also the travel restrictions that were in place. We had, I believe, the full return of every grade level wouldn't have occurred until after April break, rather, because at that point there were still safe states, travel restrictions. Any student that traveled out of the state had to be filling out a form or quarantining or testing, and it was an onerous process. Not just for families and students to be undertaking, but I want to make it really clear, this is this group that doesn't get a lot of kudos publicly. There's no public health entity that is contact tracing or has been managing that all year for us. We have school nurses and building principals. Those are the individuals who have been handling all of the contact tracing, monitoring all of the travel forms, following up with families about, contact, out of school contact, quarantine requirements. They've been working nonstop since school started, even in a hybrid capacity, working on the weekends, working on holidays. It's been a lot. The tracking of individual students has been challenging, and positive test cases. And so I was remiss in not mentioning them previously as part of the team that has been moving this engine of education forward through this. And we're tremendously grateful to all of their hard work. And then one of the other aspects as well was we had been at 6 feet of space in the school buildings. And so any return, the state mandated a return at 3 feet. We had anticipated proactively a return at 3 feet as well. I think everyone from Dr. Alardi to the principals to curriculum directors to the school committee all recognized that a full year without full-time in-person learning was going to be detrimental, and that we could return safely, especially with the onset of nicer weather in April, when we could be moving some of the students outside. We have tents set up, we have breaks happening outside. It's really a rotating, the population of students, particularly at the HOD, where we're out of space and over capacity at this point, that is just constantly being managed. And I know some folks have questioned whether, how can the question of lunch be disrupting the return to school. And, when you're required by the state to have children who don't have a mask on, who are eating 6 feet apart, and you're over capacity in your buildings, which is already small, we're moving at one point, a portion of the student population is on this playground. The other portion of that class is over on the back playground. We have kids in the side lot eating snack. We have a tent set up that some people are moving into. We have kids, half of them are eating in the cafeteria, the other half are in the classroom. They all have to be separated, and they all have to be monitored for who they're near as well. Again, and it's not, I think everyone was happy to do the work once we had updated parameters from the state, but we were certainly willing to do that as a district before the directive from DESE came down. And I've now gone on extraordinarily. I've been very long-winded in my chime in with that. So
no, that's great. I think it's kind of the meat and potatoes of, I think it's important stuff, because I don't know if, and I'm speaking for myself, but as a parent, but also I think for a lot of parents, that I don't think we realized how difficult it was to work within the state's parameters, because I think that I think it's hard to understand that, and because the state, it was also a question, I guess we can kind of wrap up this topic with this, is that as a parent during this since last summer, let's say, when we were starting to talk about going back in the fall, I was always curious, are these guidelines or are these mandates? And is there any gray area? Because that's something that it seemed like sometimes the word guidelines was used. So if it's a 6-foot guideline, well, what if we did 5, what if you could do 5 feet, because again, it's sort of, this is all based on educated guesses anyway, right? With the, as far as we don't have enough data, scientific data yet, as we get more and more all the time. So I was just curious about that. Were they given, are these DESE parameters given as any flexibility, or was it black and white?
Medora was on the reopening committee, so she had direct knowledge. I'm gonna let you start.
These are rules that if you were going to be operating in exception to those rules, you would have needed permission.
Okay.
Is the best way to sum it up. And so, for example, it has been a very unfortunate this year confluence of circumstances at the H. Olive Day School, right? And more on that later when we talk about overcrowding, but that school is at capacity. I know, Jill, you were kind enough to sit down with Thomas and I a while ago, kind of before COVID, and we discussed the enrollment issue and the plans for expansion. The tipping point really for enrollment came this year. And so this fall we had, I want to say, something in the neighborhood of 170 kindergarten students enrolled. And so a normal past year class size of kindergarten would range anywhere from, 130 to maybe 140 students, give or take a few here or there. We knew this big class was coming because we'd had enrollment projections. It just also happened to coincide with the time when we were having to have children spaced apart. Mm-hmm. We couldn't access all of our space at the HOD because some of it was being used to store items. Not all of it was appropriately ventilated. You had instructional spaces that were being used for other purposes too, like lunches, things like that. And so ultimately, this year, and ideally it's projected to just be for this year, kindergarten in the full return is still half day. Right. And, we fully recognize that that's been extraordinarily disruptive. Folks who anticipated a full return were expecting a full day of kindergarten return for their students. And the issue was simply that with the directives we received from DESE with respect to spacing, there was no way to be moving that large a number of students through the building at a given point, making sure that they were receiving appropriate mass breaks, making sure that they were getting appropriate class, outside time, and making sure that they were able to eat a lunch while they were in the building, because there was no logistical way to have that many students in the building spaced 6 feet apart across the course of the day, you would have been running lunch from 9 a.m. until dismissal time.
Mm.
And, there's an issue with there's some ancillary issues to that as well. So just to, kind of further to the point of, are these rules or are these guidelines? The district proposed multiple workaround solutions to DESE and said, okay, if we do it this way, can we have them in the building? If we set up lunch like this, if we have them back to back, so they're not facing each other when they're eating, but they're only 3 feet apart. If we do it like this, if we stagger seating, if we have kids sitting, 4.5 feet apart, and those requests, those suggestions, those proposed workarounds that the district presented were rejected, and they were not approved by DESE, and we could not have that many students in the building at a time given our space limitations.
Okay.
And it is really unfortunate. And every effort, I personally as a committee member, and I'm certain the administration at both school buildings and at the superintendent's office are entirely, the time we have spent considering where to put children during a lunch period or a mask break is not a small amount of time. I think we'd all, rather think about anything else at this point. But it's, it was a problem that was not solvable given the requirements imposed by DESE and then simultaneously the spacing constraints that we're experiencing in our school buildings.
Okay. Well, thank you, Medora, because I think that is a really important information for everyone, given the last year. So I'm glad we spent some time on that. And thank you for clarifying that for me and for everyone. So I think we only have about 7 minutes left, if we're going to kind of keep it to the time that we planned. So let's do it this way. I've got 3 or 4 questions from the community, and I'm going to pose the question to one or the other of you, probably, and just take a minute each to, kind of explain what you know about the topic. The first question is pretty basic. It's just, Jen, I'll send it to you. What is your view of school libraries in terms of as the evolution of the school library going forward?
So I work in a school. I've many experiences with various different types of school libraries. I fully support them. Libraries, yes, you could go to I've heard people say, well, you could go to a public library. Well, not everybody has access, believe it or not. I mean, some children, their parents don't take them to a library. So it's a great equalizer for education for all children. And it also discovers it's a time to browse. It's a time, you don't have to sit down and read a certain book. You get to pick out your own book. You get to hear the librarian read books to you. Some children don't get read to at home. I know that might sound a little odd here in Norfolk, but it's true. But it's been shown to have a great impact on achievement and graduation rates, and really, really discover the love of reading and books and literature and enjoying just looking at them, hearing them read to you, reading them, picking out your own choices. So I think school libraries are wonderful and a valuable part of the education.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. And as I thought about it too, just the idea that technology, a lot of the librarians are also becoming media specialists, in which they're very getting a lot of experience and education in technology, so that they are another part of as part of the faculty and staff at the school, they can provide that as well. Right. So, okay. So going from like sort of a lighter one to a heavier topic, if you each want to weigh in on this for about a minute, someone asked for the 2 candidates, what are your views on critical race theory? So I don't know who wants to go first.
Go ahead, Jen, if you want to go first. Oh, wait, but you're muted.
I'm muted. Sorry. It's so good too. Unless you want to go first, Medora, I feel like I'm always jumping in. Yeah, this is a really interesting question. Thank you for it. I know it's a very, very popular topic right now. I'm not well versed in it. From my understanding about it is it's not a curriculum. It's a movement. It's a thought process about inequities in law and race. That's my understanding. I'm not trying to say that I know everything about it at all. So what I do know, and how it relates to at least the Norfolk elementary schools, is our curriculum comes from DESE, which is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And what we focus on is the social emotional learning, how to solve conflict, how to make friends, how to interact, how to recognize bullying. That's our social emotional curriculum. And in terms of race, it's really the social studies curriculum that talks just about the civil wars and civil rights and whatnot. So we don't get into any laws. And in my personal opinion, so that's number one, in case anyone's wondering, is it taught in the Norfolk schools? My answer is no, not that I'm aware of. It's not according to the framework, so I'm anticipating it's not. But we also develop very diverse books selections that people are exposed, because as we know, Norfolk isn't the most diverse town. So they're exposed to other cultures and religions, which is very important.
Oh, great. Well, Jen, thank you very much for that thorough answer as it relates to the fact that it's kind of a curriculum question, which comes directly from DESE, right, from the state. So thank you for that answer. And moving on to another question from the community. Medora, I'll send this one to you. It's basically wondering, what is Norfolk's per pupil expense, and how does that compare to other similarly sized towns?
Sure. That's a fantastic question, and I think it's fairly easy to answer. I can say that both with respect to the state average spending for per pupils, we're below the state average. And then when you look at us compared to what are referred to as comparison districts within the state, and I can explain what that means, we're under as well. So I'm going to share some screens, if you'll bear with me. I can actually give some data. So this comes from the budget presentation that's annually given before the school committee votes our requested budget each year. So if you look, the red line, my Zoom bar is kind of blocking it. I'm assuming you can see it. The red line is the state average. So you see a steady growth upward on average. Each district within the state is spending a little bit more each year, and it is consistently higher per pupil than what is being spent in Norfolk. Now, it's worthwhile to mention that this is comparing Norfolk to districts that go K through 12, districts that are in different geographical locations. So, it's not direct apples to apples, but we are consistently spending less than the state average in per pupil spending annually. We came close around 2015 to really closing that gap, and then began to fall off subsequent to that. These earlier years where we were below the state average were still years of repercussion from the economic downturn in sort of the 2008 to 2010 type time frame. We're still feeling the financial repercussions of that even now. But what this little point, when the data starts dropping again, really correlates to is when we started to see a spike in enrollment in the district as well. So while we were increasing the budget requests each year, enrollment was outpacing the budget requests that we were able to secure and work with the town on, to the extent that our per pupil average spend was dropping compared to state averages. If you go even a little bit deeper, this is a per pupil expenditure comparison between Norfolk and like districts. So Norfolk is unique insofar as we are a K through 6 school district that feeds into a regional school system. And so you'll note that the other towns we're being compared to in this set of data all fit that demographic as well. So it's a little more of an accurate comparison as opposed to, say, comparing us to Boston Public Schools or something like that, where it's not necessarily apples to apples. So here you'll see Norfolk is consistently second to last in per pupil spending on an annual basis. Only Berkeley is spending less than us per pupil. If you want to really take a close look, you'll see that here, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse hovering, but here's Plainville, here's Rentham. So year over year, we are spending less than both Plainville and Rentham in per pupil spending. And in the most recent year that we have data for, which is fiscal year 2019, Norfolk spent an average of $16,285 per pupil. Rentham spent about $500, give or take, more per pupil. And Plainville spent almost a full $1,000 more per pupil. Another interesting thing to look at if you want to compare how we spend compared to like districts and these close by districts that feed into the King Philip system the same way that Norfolk does as a district. So if you look here, you'll see that we're $16,285. Again, Rentham is $17,245, and Plainville's at $17,531 for the most recent year we have data for. Both of those numbers are above the state average as well. So per pupil spending, I would say, is not where it could or should be. That's always a touchy subject. We can even dive deeper into what our annual budget requests are, things of that nature, but I'm not 100% sure that we have that much time left on the Zoom, although I highly encourage anyone who has questions about this to please reach out to myself or Thomas Doyle or Dr. Alardi, the budget subcommittee members. We are probably happier and more interested to discuss this than normal people should be, but it is what drives the engine of education in Norfolk, the spending that we're able to accomplish on a per pupil basis. The upside for now is that we are able to do a tremendous amount of educating, despite the fact that we are underspending compared to both the state average and the averages of our like comparisons. However, with increasing enrollment, I am very confident that we are going to reach a tipping point where that may no longer be feasible. And so, when the school comes to the town, historically, we are asking for what's referred to as a level services budget. That's what's being requested this year. It's a little bit of a higher number because we had to cut our budget significantly last year due to COVID. But year over year, on average, what we're asking for is a level services budget. That essentially means maintaining what we've had in the prior year without adding anything new. That's what a level services budget is. And we will reach a point where, as our enrollment continues to grow and as our the needs of the student population continue to shift. For example, Norfolk has had a tremendous growth in English language learners in the district recently. And with the growth in that student population come different requirements for education and English as a second language, and that's tracked very closely by the state. You need to be, spending and monitoring that growth and tracking that progress very closely. There will be shifts going forward where the budget will become a hot topic because level services will mean something different 3 years from now as we have more students and a different student demographic, a different learner demographic making up the student population. So I hope that answered the question from the community. This all is available on the district website as well. The entire budget presentation for our request for this year that will be voted on at town meeting, and a kind of a retrospective as well as of where our budgets have been across the past 10 to 15 years for comparison's sake.
Awesome. Thank you, Medora. That was so thorough and so informative. And my camera has seemed to decide not to work. So this is like the technology glitch meet and greet. But anyway, you can still hear me. So, but thank you for that. It was really good information. And I think, as you said, to reiterate, if someone wants to sort of question further or go even more, dig deeper or dive under, whatever, to contact you as school committee members or Dr. Alardi, the superintendent. Okay, so we have one final question, which is basically, it kind of brings us back to a little bit more about the pandemic, and as we're sort of at this new place, right, moving forward, with being back in full time, but also it sounds like Massachusetts is going to no longer have an outdoor mask mandate beginning on Friday, this coming Friday, April 30th. So, so in other words, things are changing. Restrictions are lifting slowly. And Jen, I will send this last question to you. Someone had written to me, I'd love to hear your views on how the schools are going to handle the pandemic now that guidelines are easing, teachers are vaccinated, and studies have shown there's very little spread in school, and also COVID is rarely spread outdoors. For example, the elementary kids are still being asked to, wear masks at recess. So if you could touch on that topic, that'd be great.
So, as I said earlier, and I appreciate the question, everything is so fluid, and I can appreciate people are like, why isn't it changing now, right now? As a school committee, we have to, it's always top down, whether it's from DESE or we work very closely with our Board of Health. I've had other questions about quarantine time. This is now new quarantine. Who needs to quarantine also just changed this weekend. Whereas right before break, the rules were definitely different, and our Board of Health had different rules than what the CDC were saying. So where I'm going with this is that things are constantly changing. And we take that direction from the Board of Health, our Board of Health, our community nurses, as well as DESE.
The trajectory of the pandemic is shifting thanks to vaccination and, just general changes in behavior. And I think that it's tremendous that transmission rate in town has gone down. And I think we would all agree that a movement back towards normalcy, normalcy is what we all want to see. I would just remind everyone that we are subject as a committee, and the district is subject to the regulations that are imposed by the state. And so, to the extent that you need to be wearing a mask in a restaurant if you're inside, inside versus outside, all of those regulations, while they are changing and they are fluid right now, that will be direction that we receive from the state. And, we will, in some ways, it's a little easier now than it was, say, last summer when, personally, I felt like there was much more sort of flying blind. And when we said fluid, we meant it was like being inside a washing machine and you never knew, kind of what was going to come out the next week. This is more like a nice steady stream that's flowing towards, reopening and fewer restrictions. But it would be disingenuous of me to say that it was going to happen as quickly as everybody would like to see it happen. And for any number of reasons, but when you're dealing with layers of state regulation, DESE departmental regulations, and then, those being imposed upon school districts and districts implementing them, there's going to be a little bit of a time delay. And, we're going to work as aggressively as we can to, lift the restrictions as it's deemed safe and appropriate to do so by DESE and the state.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you both for weighing in on that. Again, I think that knowing that this is the most pressing topic in terms of, even though, again, we're now students are in full time, but there's still so much, like you said, there's so much fluidity. So thank you, Jen, for taking that. Thank you, Medora, for chiming in as well, weighing in. And I think we've gone through our community questions. So before we wrap, is there anything else you wanted to add about topics that you thought was important for Norfolk to know?
I would just like to say thank you. If you watch this, thank you for listening. And if I could encourage everyone to be involved with understanding what is happening in our schools, from budget to spacing to just curriculum, or even awesome things that get mentioned at school committee meetings, please be informed, because we definitely need things get put forth at town meeting for vote. So if you can get to, I would humbly ask for your vote May 4th at town election, which is at Freeman Kennedy this Tuesday. And also, please, 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 if you would consider going to town meeting Saturday, May 8th, 10 a.m. at King Philip High School on the field. It's a very nice field. Bring a lawn chair. And if it's very hot, bring a umbrella for shade. Please come and vote for the school budget. Thank you.
Okay, great. Medora, any last thoughts before we wrap?
Sure. I'm sorry I got kicked out. I'm afraid I had a battery running low issue. But absolutely, I would 100% reiterate what I'm sure Jen just said, which is please vote, and also please come to town meeting and make sure that you're making an informed choice and participating in the process of voting, not just for the school's budget, but for the budget that the entire town will need to move forward into next year.
Okay, so Tuesday, May 4th and Saturday, May 8th, 2021 are our key dates. Okay, well, we did it. We did our meet and greet. This should go up on some sort of fun bloopers for how Zoom technology can help or hurt you.
Right?
It's my bedtime too, so we made it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to sign off of our town now, and then so that then we can officially wrap up our meet and greet, and I'm hopeful that community members enjoy watching this and understanding that obviously we're all human with our technology, especially me. I'm not even human. I'm a below human with my technology, but also that it's such informative information and current information, and I'm very happy to support the both of you in your candidacy. So I'm happy to be able to do this and have our chat. So thank you again to both Jennifer Wynn and Medora Champagne.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for having us.
Thank you
Yes.
for doing this. Thank you.
You're welcome. No, it was great. It was great time spent with you both. And on behalf of NCTV and for my little show, Our Town, thank you for watching.